but it's why we do things like we don't invite people over. We're afraid of their judgment. We're afraid they're not going to like our, I don't know, smell of our house or something. And so we just don't even take risks, or at least I don't often. But I do force myself to try.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Hey, compadres. How are you guys? Your mystery meat sandwich for today is a quote by William Shakespeare, a little guy named William Shakespeare. Okay, love me or hate me, both are in my favor. What do you think about that? Well, I think it's true because I think a lot of it has to do with how we frame things. At least for me, I know that that is true. And there are a lot of other quotes too that are similar. I know there's one about life unfolds always in my favor, which I love. And that also is a quote that, reminds me that it's in the eye of the beholder. It's how I'm choosing to look at a situation. So today I wanted to talk about ADHD again, but specifically what I wanted to talk about was emotional regulation or dysregulation, as the case may be. And I'm going to call it rejection sensitivity. And these two things are extremely common for people who deal with ADHD and have an ADHD diagnosis, or who are perhaps needing an ADHD diagnosis. So we're going to stay tuned for that. But also on this topic, I just wanted to say that, it's the beginning of May. For those of you with children, you are rounding the corner of the final leg of the race. And it is really difficult to finish strong right now. I know that. It is tough to come up with new ideas for lunches at this point. You may be in the phase that I am in, which is just find something to throw in your lunch. I don't care if it's like a pot roast from like last week, or maybe, some old trail mix that everybody took the M&Ms out of, and the rest of it is just like a bag of peanuts and raisins, and you found it under the freezer. Just take it. I don't care. Just take it. Go to school. I don't know what else to say. I'm out of ideas. So if that's you, you're not alone. Okay. We can do this. We can do it together. We can dig deep. We can get to the end of the school year as one, just like they promised us in We Are the World. We can stand together as one. So lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Maybe not with good lunchtime ideas, but definitely to let you know that I am with you. Hashtag simpatico. We are together in this challenge.
And now, onto the Chaplain's Chat.
Thank you for listening to the Chaplain's Chat. We are talking about emotional dysregulation today, or emotional regulation, and specifically rejection sensitivity is the topic that I wanted to talk about. And this stems from an experience that I had, and I mentioned it in Eternally Expecting. If you read that book, that's my first book. I talked about a time when I went to interview for a nanny position, funny enough. And this was right after I graduated from college, and I wasn't super sure what I was going to do. I had this communication degree, wasn't really sold on a specific avenue that I wanted to go down within that field. And so I thought, well, I'm engaged now. Maybe, that's what I'll do for a few weeks is just be a nanny, collect some cash, and then hightail it on out of there. So what ended up happening is they offered me a job working in the placement agency, the nanny placement agency. And I can't remember how they worded it, but essentially it was a fool's errand for me to think that they thought I was some kind of amazing office manager person. Basically, they wanted a front desk girl and they wanted me to answer the phones. I figured that out, of course, once I started working there, which is fine. It's all fine, but it's kind of funny. I was like, this is my first job out of college. And I think I had some expectations around it. And so when they pitched it to me that, oh, we just envision you just running the front office and, making all of the packets of information that these people need when they come in and they kind of, I don't know, that doesn't sound very amazing, but they poised it in a way as such where I was like, hey, that sounds pretty good. That sounds amazing. Let me give it a whirl. But it wasn't until I got in there and got sort of access to the files that I pulled my file one day and I read the comments and the feedback about my interview that day that I'd come in for a nanny job. And at the very end of the interviewer's checklist and comments and all of that, there is this area, or there was this area where they could check a box to give basically a summary of what they thought the candidate was or who they thought they were in terms of, is this a fantastic candidate? Is this a candidate who needs to search for other work? And everything in between. So there was this one box and it said, candidate is right for the right job, meaning this candidate needs to be the right fit. It's not that this is an outstanding candidate and, this candidate just cannot be beat and is basically Mary Poppins. But it was the candidate is right for the right job. And you know what? I was offended. I don't really remember why I was offended, except that I think what I did was I looked at the other options, and one was like outstanding candidate, one was very good candidate, and then this was like number 3 on the list. So I perceived that experience as rejection, that they rejected me, they didn't like what I had to offer, they weren't buying what I was selling, whatever. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with how I framed that situation. And of course, we frame the things that happen to us in life based on previous experiences. So we come into any given day with our old, baggage full of stuff that we've collected along the way. And that is how we end up seeing our lives, is through those lenses. And this is not like my made up thing. This is like, just what I've learned from being in many years of therapy and going to rehab. And by the way, I need to say that if you ever want just a crash course in psychology, go to rehab. It is the best, I swear. It's just, you learn very simple, bite-size, manageable lessons about psychology. You learn a lot about yourself, and it is so helpful because then you can actually remember what you learned. You can see it in real life. You're not going to learn, 14 steps to self-awareness, or maybe an acronym of the word superfragilistic what is that word? Super califragilisticexpialidocious, something like that, but it's a long word. Point is, it's a long word. Okay, so we're not going to be able to remember, at least I won't remember, an acronym for something with a super long set of letters. I don't know, over 40, not sure. And mother of many, which is a thing, by the way. If you've been pregnant and had babies, you do lose brain cells. You lose them, they don't come back. I don't care how many games of memory you play with your kids. I'm living proof. You're welcome. So, rejection sensitivity, back to the kind of the main point. If you have ADHD, and if you haven't been diagnosed, maybe you can relate to this. Maybe possibly you need to be evaluated. I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just throwing it out there. And P.S., I just want to say that I know I try and remind everybody of this, but just in case I forget, here it is. Here's the reminder. I am not an expert. I am only an expert in my story and my experience. So when I share things, please don't think that I'm saying you need to blah, 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 because I don't know what you need. You should seek professional treatment. That's the only thing I will say that you need to do if you think you might have ADHD or if you want to learn other tools from professionals. I would recommend, highly recommend going to see a professional and just keep trying until you find the right fit. You may try one out and just feel like, nah, and then go to another one. And then you kind of go, oh, yeah, I think this person, I can learn from this person, or I can hear this person without getting offended or feeling rejected. All right, so I'm bringing it back to what I was trying to talk about. Rejection sensitivity is a perceived fear of failure. So those of us who are addicts and alcoholics or have substance use disorder issues, those of us who have ADHD, just some personality types have rejection sensitivity. And essentially what that is it's a presentation where we are quicker to go into fight, flight, or freeze, which of course you probably know what that is. It's how you respond to a situation. Do you tend to, get like just override those feelings of fear and jump into the crisis and be able to handle it? Or do you run from it? Or do you just become paralyzed, right? So how it manifests itself in my life in the area of rejection is if I fear that I'm going to be rejected, I don't want to take a risk, generally speaking. So what this looks like for me in my life, and again, I'm going to use sobriety as my example. When I noticed that I had shifted in my alcoholism and substance use disorderism, I went from feeling like, no, I got this. I can stop drinking anytime I want to. I just don't want to. When I realized that I had pushed past that point, essentially, and was in a spot where I wasn't sure that I could quit drinking. And I didn't tell anybody. I was still in some amount of denial because I didn't want to get help because I could not fathom my life without alcohol. I didn't know what that would look like. And the thought terrified me. And also, I was afraid of trying to stop drinking and then failing. So sure enough, when I went off to rehab and I tried to get sober, and then I failed the first time because I relapsed, and 2 weeks later, I was back in rehab. But I just was like, yep, see, this is what happens. This is how it goes, is I try something and I fail. And because I had sort of decided that almost about myself ahead of time, that is exactly what I lived into, if that makes sense. So, in a way, I kind of manifested it, if you will. I believed that I was going to fail, so I failed. And I'm not saying that's the only reason, but it just was kind of one of those things that like was kind of, yeah, interesting. It's just interesting looking back in hindsight, right? And so for me, I don't want to do things usually that involve an element of risk. Like, thank God I'm not dating. Thank God I'm, happily married. I'm settled. And I told Andrew, if you pass, that's it for me. Like, I'm not going on any dating apps, websites, whatever. I'm not going on. It's just lunch, or I mean, nothing against those programs. I'm saying I do not have the balls to go on those programs because I am terrified of rejection. And part of that is also being female, just knowing there's always somebody prettier out there. There's always someone out there who's more interesting, well read, someone who's smarter than me, somebody who has different skills than I do. And my insecurities dictate those fears. It's the way I see myself, and that I'm not enough, just me being who I am. And so that prevents me from doing things like that, for example. If I were to lose my husband, God forbid, knock on wood, I would be horrible. I'm actually saying this, right? Which is part of the problem at dating. I just imagine I would be terrible. And so bringing it home to other activities, I think I'm a terrible cook, for example. Maybe not terrible, but I'm not the best. I have some friends who are amazing cooks, amazing. And they are those friends who, they make it look effortless. Y'all, I'm here to tell you, like they just whipped it together. And I can stand with them in the kitchen and talk to them. And they're like just fine talking to me. They can tell a story. They can be fully animated. They can be spinning tunes on their phone and coming up with a playlist for the meal. And I'm telling you, if that were me, I would be sweating, swearing. I'd be like, I need you to go away. I'm trying to follow this recipe. For example, last night we had our somebody from school, an administrator from school, over for dinner, and I followed someone's advice and used a cut of meat in what I was making that I thought was going to be the same cut of meat that I usually use, but it wasn't. It didn't turn out the same. It did not meet my expectations, is what I'm saying. And it was kind of one of those awful moments where I thought, okay, shoot, should I say anything? Should I not say anything? What should I do here? I didn't say anything. And probably legit, the person went home and was like, that was not the bomb. And so I, hashtag sorry. If you're listening, you know who you are. What do I talk about all the time? I talk about getting comfortable with the cringeworthy, getting comfortable doing things that make us uncomfortable. That includes taking risks. That includes making a dinner that is subpar in front of somebody who I would probably otherwise like to impress on some level. But it's why in my second book, in Eternally Awkward, I talk about, being a kid and not wanting to audition for a play because I was afraid of failing. I just didn't want to try and then fail. So I didn't audition. I froze up. I wouldn't do it. But it's why we do things like we don't invite people over. We're afraid of their judgment. We're afraid they're not going to like our, I don't know, smell of our house or something. And so we just don't even take risks, or at least I don't often. But I do force myself to try. And so what I mean by that is, okay, if I'm going to be touting getting comfortable with the cringeworthy, then guess what that means? Surprise, surprise. I'm going to have to do it. So, yeah. And I do it. Ergo, my situation last night. So, a lot of the rejection sensitivity is coupled with, in my experience, emotional regulation or dysregulation. So for me, and I learned this somewhere as a tool, what that looks like is a stoplight. Okay, so if you can picture a stoplight, obviously there's green, there's red, and there's yellow. And so the green is where I'm good to go. I'm feeling confident even in my insecurities, but I'm feeling like everything's okay. I've got this kind of lighthearted view of the world. My emotions are just super light that day for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's hormonal, whatever it is, I'm feeling fine. And I'm feeling fine in terms of laughing at myself, kind of 12 steppers call it rule 62, not taking ourselves too seriously. And I'm just like not sensitive that day. Well, okay, so that's a good day to make an amends to somebody, right? It's a good day to do anything that could possibly involve any sort of rejection. It's a good time to capitalize on self care. It's a good time to do those things that we really are afraid of doing because it does involve some risk. Maybe asking for a raise at your job. Maybe it's asking for a favor from somebody that you know you have a pretty high chance of being shut down. Whatever it is, it's a good day for those things, is the green day. So the yellow on the spotlight, the emotional spotlight, is where I'm feeling a little unsettled in my spirit, is how I will describe it. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable in my uncomfortableness and not feeling great about myself. Maybe I have some personal issues that are going on and that are preventing me from being wholeheartedly in the moment and acceptance, right? I'm not really in acceptance, but I'm trying to get there. I'm just kind of dicey, right? I'm on like a rickety bridge, I would say. Okay. So those are the caution days where I really need to be gentle with myself and think about what it is that I can handle today. And of course, the first, step when I'm on those days is just asking for peace and just knowing that I'm okay and I'm safe, right? And my higher power does remind me of that pretty much automatically when I start to pray, is that, you know what? Nothing's going to happen to you today that is out of my higher power's knowledge. And there's nothing that will happen to me today that cannot be used by my higher power ultimately in some way, shape, or form eventually. Okay. So I need to remind myself of that. And the yellow days are a good day to ask for clarification. Okay. So it's those days where you are in maybe an intense discussion, where I might say, what I hear you saying is, right? That's the famous line from therapy that we repeat back to the person when we're in a discussion, what we thought we heard them say, so that we are sure that we're on the same page as that person. Okay. So I might also say, let me just ask for clarification. What did you mean by ... So just making sure I understand what the person is actually saying. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about fancied or real. So, in other words, sometimes I will create things in my head during discussions that are actually not factual. Okay. They're not real. They're fancied. Okay. I'm making them up. But sometimes I don't realize that because my emotions are starting to get in the way of that. So that's when it's just a really good idea to just take a breather, stop and do the halt, which used to be just a rehab thing, but now it's a therapy thing too. I hear it quite a bit, which is hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Okay. So it's like, let me just check in with my body. Let me just breathe. Let me see if I'm any of these things: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And then I'm going to just put my hand on my chest or on my heart. And I'm just going to breathe. And I'm just going to remind myself, you are safe and I love you. And I know it sounds weird to tell yourself that you love yourself. Maybe that doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me. It's not comfortable. Woo. But it is something that my therapist from rehab taught me to do. And he was adamant that I was supposed to look in the mirror every day and tell myself that I loved myself. I was supposed to say it 10 times. And eventually I did start believing it. And I lived into that, which is another story. But to just put my hand here on my chest and just say, okay, you are safe. I love you. Everything's going to be okay. I don't usually get to decide what that okay looks like, but it's going to be okay one way or another. So when I'm on the red, so the red light of this emotional stoplight, if you can picture that, the red light is when it's like, pump the brakes and stop. You need to get back to that person later who is talking to you about something that you are not emotionally capable of handling at that moment. Or at least for me, that's how it is. So what happens is, I mean, it's happened to me so much that it's just easy to express to you exactly what this is. If you've experienced it, you'll know. One's cognitive abilities go down when one's emotions go up. So when I am triggered by something, my emotions will fly up. Perhaps it's a situation involving politics, or maybe some belief system, or maybe it's COVID. I mean, you name it, right? The past few years have shown us that people have different opinions on lots of things. So if you shoot up to that red light immediately, that emotional red light, I have found the best thing for me is to immediately pump the brakes and not react. And the best thing for me to do at that point, and these are a couple tools from Alcoholics Anonymous, the book, is to pause when agitated or doubtful. Now, I just had my 11th year sobriety birthday. And if you look on your phone and you're watching YouTube, or you're listening to music and you pause it, you press that button that looks like two lines, right? It looks like an 11. And so that is my goal this year, is that I will hit that pause button mentally for my 11th year of sobriety, that I will push that mental pause button and I won't react. That is my hope. Because if I react, it's usually not pretty. I usually end up owing an amends, and there's just more cleanup work. And I don't want to have to deal with it, quite frankly. I feel like, kind of lazy, don't really want to clean it up. So if I can pause when agitated or doubtful, I can then ask my higher power for the next indicated step. What is the next right thing to do here? And sometimes the answer comes immediately, and sometimes I have to wait. I mean, it's not like, I've got this instant pipeline to God. I mean, I have to wait. And that's part of it for me, is that I want instant gratification. I just want everything to be worked out right away. And sometimes that's not what you get, or not what I get anyway. And so the other tool is the restraint of pen and tongue. And this is also from the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Restraint of pen and tongue. So what does that mean? That means, again, pumping the brakes and pausing and not picking up the phone, not picking up the phone to rip somebody else a new one. If you want to pick up the phone to call a friend and a trusted advisor, yay, perfect, good for you. Lovely idea. Talk it through. I have had many times that I've picked up the phone to call my sponsor, and I will be relaying what just happened to her. And I'm listening to myself tell her the details of the story. And I sound so dumb. Like all of a sudden, it's like I've solved my own issue because I cannot believe how dumb I sound. I mean, the whole thing is like, and then she said, and then he said this, and then this happened. And then, okay, it's first world problems. It's not that my feelings aren't valid, but it really sets me straight. It really sets my humility back in a place where it needs to be, is like, yeah, that sounds really petty, is kind of what I'll experience. Not always, but sometimes. And so pausing when agitated or doubtful, restraint of pen and tongue. And so that also means I'm not going to send a big, nasty email and hit send. I've done the draft thing before. I will send a nasty email to my drafts, and I've journaled before. I've done a lot of, I hate you, and my opinion is the right one and yours sucks. I've done all that. And I find that very helpful and cleansing. But really, the important thing is to not cause more harm. Don't cause more harm. And page 90 in the 12 and 12 talks about a spiritual axiom. That's 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, by the way. It's a book that Bill Wilson wrote later after the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And basically, it talks about it's a spiritual axiom that whenever I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. And so for me, what that means is not that, oh, well, it's my fault that blah, 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 poor me, I'm, the victim or whatever. But it's like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, that disturbed me. So what is going on inside of me? Or what is it in you that is triggering something inside of me? Some old tape is playing inside of me when you said blah, blah, blah. And you just get in this way of kind of doing it really fast once you practice this for a while. And it doesn't take a whole lot of cognitive response in the moment, which is huge. You can kind of work through it quickly, because when your cognitive abilities go down because your emotions are up, you're not thinking clearly, right? And it's scientific too. I mean, it's not something I'm like pulling out of my ASS, but when we get in that space, we're just spinning. So here's another tool that I love, okay? And that is just to go outside, put my feet on the ground. And I have said this many times before, so I apologize if this is old news for you. But what I used to experience when I had newborns is occasionally they'd get stuck in one of those crying cycles where they're crying, crying, crying. They've been fed, they've been changed. Maybe they're fighting sleep, whatever it is. If I took them outside, boom, they would, at a very minimum, they would slow their roll and they would stop crying as hard or stop entirely, because I had totally changed the environment. So it was like I had to immediately snap into something else and get those receptors to be focused on the change in the temperature. Maybe there's a wind or rain or something outside, and just completely would knock them off their spin, if you will. Well, the same is true for me. And I may not be a newborn, but I sometimes act like one. No, but for real, that is what helps me so much, is to just change my environment quickly. It's also helped me to just get in the shower, maybe cold water-ish for a few seconds. Something that will snap me out of the headspace of doom, where it's like that Apple beach ball color wheel of doom, where you're just spinning, 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 and you can't get out of it. That helps me quite a bit. So if I want to come up with some little quip and some way of remembering this, and this is from therapy as well, basically, I need to recognize where I'm at emotionally, bringing it back to rejection sensitivity. Where am I at emotionally today? Okay, where am I at on the spotlight, the emotional regulation spotlight? Am I red, green, yellow? Where am I? Okay. Number two, reflect and reframe. This is important. What is true about the situation and what have I made up? Right? What is fictitious? What is a fairy tale here? What is something that I think I'm seeing based on my previous experiences in life, right? What is it that I think I'm looking at? Because it's usually not factual. It's just my like, oh, see, there it is again, blah, blah, blah. It's just popping up again. Yep. See, it's always me. I'm always the loser, whatever it is. So when you reflect and reframe, and this is helpful when you're not in the moment, particularly in a red moment, that is when you can step back and look at all the pieces of the puzzle and differentiate the true from the false, which I cannot do when I'm in a red stoplight space. I cannot do it. My cognitive abilities have gone out the window. And at that point, it's like I'm just trying to breathe and get through it and not do any harm. And then kind of the reflection part is it comes quicker for me now, but that's more of when I can quickly kind of work through these things and get myself back down to a yellow or a green state of mind. And that's the goal, is for my emotions to stay at a green. That's a dream. Probably more realistically is yellow. And that's okay. That I can be in acceptance and pray and hopefully work myself back down to a reasonable state. So reflect, reframe, and then to recognize, and I went into this a little bit already, but the emotional reasoning, which is feelings are not facts. Okay, so what I'm feeling is not actually what's maybe happening, and being willing to admit that. So if I feel rejected, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am rejected. It is a feeling, okay? And feelings are not facts. And changing the narrative and the dialogue and the vocabulary around this is super important. So maybe it would be helpful for me to not talk about rejection so much and substitute the word disappointed. Maybe I was disappointed I didn't get that job, or that situation didn't work out the way I had hoped that it was. But the thing I've learned, I will talk about in the bailout bag. And that is the treasure for the day that has been the biggest deal for me.
Finally, here's your bailout bag.
Here's your bailout bag. At the beginning, the mystery meat sandwich, we talked about the William Shakespeare quote, love me or hate me, both are in my favor. How many times have you had a situation where it just was looking bleak? Maybe you even reacted emotionally, and yet it all kind of just worked out in the end. The biggest deal for me is to do no harm. To do no harm and let it play out. Let it play all the way through to the end before I make a snap judgment, to just hit that pause button and be able to let things roll. And I am here to tell you, if I don't F with it, it turns out. It just turns out. When I was talking about earlier, having people over for dinner and the meal not turning out the way it was supposed to in my mind, on an emotional level, on our conversational level, it turned out great. And so no one cared. Like, no one gave a rat's ass. Like, no one cared. Okay. The important part was the connection and the communication with the people there. It's far more important than the meal or what the house smells like. All that's BS, but I can wrap myself up in that depending on where I'm at spiritually or my level of fatigue or you name it. But if I back up and if I look at everything on the whole, I remember what is important, and that's people. And that's why these tools are so important. To treat myself kindly and lovingly, and to not get wrapped up in, I was rejected, and no, it's not the opportunity that my higher power had for me. But my higher power is just fast forwarding to the next opportunity. That's what my higher power is doing. No, we're not going to have you get sidetracked with this opportunity that you think you were rejected by or you think you failed on. We're just going to pass that one by because I have this for you over here. I'm not saying, anything about anything. I'm not saying, everything happens for a reason or anything like that. But I'm just saying that life unfolds, and it unfolds in my favor based on how I am looking at that. And that's a choice. So yeah, these are challenges for me because I have ADHD and because I'm in recovery. But the more I practice these tools, the better and faster I get at them. Is life going to be easy and fun and like hunky-dory, Punky Brewster all the time? No, it's not. But if I have tools to help me every day, I'm winning. I just am winning, right? I'm winning at this thing. And I'm not thinking things like, drinking is a solution or gambling or shopping or acting out in some weird behavior that's not at the root, not getting to the root of the actual emotion. Feelings are just feelings. They come and go, right? Good feelings come and go. Feelings we don't like come and go. We just need to be patient, wait it out, treat ourselves kindly in the process, and turn it over. And that's not always easy to do in every circumstance. We just do the best that we can, and we try not to cause damage along the way to ourselves or to others. That's my little piece of gold for the day, is to try not to cause damage to ourselves or to others. And I can't do that alone. I need my higher power's help to do that. So I invite you to think about anything in there that you liked today. Just take what you like, leave the rest. That is the purpose of the bailout bag. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.